In this video, I want to share a few more tips on making good decisions and avoiding bad ones. Some will be, some newer things, but there'll be a bunch that will build on and kind of reinforce some of the things I've already talked about, because I think a lot of the building blocks are in place at this point. So first of all, asking questions. I do like to ask questions. I kind of made a living out of asking questions and not to be afraid to do so. And sometimes the most innocent, naive question is powerful, is meaningful. It's one of the reasons why I think diversity is so helpful, it's so useful, as we've talked about in Module 1 of the course, and getting alternative points of view. People that look at a situation and look at it a little bit different, that's great. And so if you want to make a good decision, you want to make good decisions, asking a lot of questions and getting alternative points of view from different people is a really, really good thing to do. Having said that, I touched on this in the last video on making good decisions. You have to decide, right? We can't take forever. And I just want to reinforce that point. Often when I'm talking about decision-making biases and a lot of the things we've talked about here in this course, somebody might raise their hand and say, I get it, I understand, it makes sense, 100% I get it, but I don't have time to be analyzing everything. And my answer is, don't analyze everything. You remember what a prejudgment is. Prejudgment is when you decide something is the way it is and you stick to it. There is an aspect of a prejudgment that is good, and that is the speed that comes with it. It gives you a heuristic, as the decision-making folks talk about. It gives you a sense of moving quickly. What I said about prejudgments is that you can go too far, or you could apply prejudgments to complicated situations that you really shouldn't. So we don't want to do that. But there is an element there that says, some shortcuts, some speed count. And so this is, one of those places where nuance, there's that word again, where nuance is important. I mean, how do you exactly balance this? I wish I can give you some type of formula, with variables and the formula, and you just plug in your data, and then all of a sudden this is exactly what the balance is. But what I could do is reinforce for you the two things you're trying to do. And as in many aspects of leadership, and maybe this gets back to the linear thinking point I made earlier when we talked about goal setting. It's not just about being analytical, and it's not just about acting quickly and trying to get to the bottom line and make that decision. In fact, the linear thinking idea would say, if it's good to be analytical, it's good to be more analytical, and it's even better to be more analytical. And it would say the same thing about speed. If it's good to be fast, it's good to be as fast as possible. Well, maybe both of those ideas are not so great. It's the balance. As in many things, it's not an either-or scenario, right? It's not choosing between two alternatives. It's actually doing both. That's why this stuff's not that easy. It's doing both. It's being fast and it's being analytical at the same time. I think you've got the tools to do that, but I would say that that's something that you want to put up front, in front of you as kind of your meta goal in all of this. And it's also what your answer should be to anyone who asks you, don't you think there's a risk to being, taking so much time or being so analytical or asking so many questions? Well, the answer is you got to do both, and you got to balance the two. And different decisions will come up with different balances. So that's something I think very important to keep in mind. Don't stick with the wrong choice. I was talking about the Paleo Police in an earlier module. When they came after me with all kinds of complaints that I didn't know what I was talking about, they were sticking to the wrong choice, which is that there is only one solution. There is only one way that you should eat, and that's the paleo diet. There's nothing else. There is just nothing else, and that's just not true. We all vary. We're all different. You need to customize for each person, and maybe that's not the right one, and maybe I don't want to do that. But they were sticking to the wrong, they were doubling down. I know a CEO who once told me something pretty wise. He said, if I'm right half the time, I think I could be really successful in business and in life. And I asked him, half the time, it's good, but it's not, what about the other half? And he said, because he was waiting for me to say that, he said, well, as long as I know that when I'm not right or I'm not exactly right, I'm pivoting, I'm adjusting, I'm changing. That's the key. And actually, that's pretty smart. If we're going to put pressure on ourselves to say we have to be right about every decision, we have to get everything right, I mean, that's not possible. You can't do it. It puts unnecessary pressure on us. So we try to be as right as we can. We balance, action and analytics. We got that. But for those times when it's not working right, it's not working well, we pivot. And by the way, when I just talked earlier in the last video about assumptions and testing the assumptions, that's a tool you could use to help you think about how to adjust when something is not going right, or even in the earliest steps. And that's the power of the pivot. Adaptation, change, big themes that I'm going to talk about in the 4th course, because that's about each of us as individuals. Really important. Another tool that could help you that I've mentioned earlier is experimentation. Look for experiments that don't cost you a lot of money, that don't cost you a lot of time, that will enable us or enable you potentially to see, is this the right path? So you test out a new product or a service. You test out a new way of communicating. You test out whatever it is you want to test out. And remember, I said this earlier, Jeff Bezos is known for, obviously from Amazon, talking about experimentation all the time. And he said, if you know it's going to work, then it's not an experiment. So I just repeat that. I remind you of that because it's true. If you really want to experiment, there is a risk that it might not work, but that's why you put limitations around it. And that's how you make better decisions, because you're building up to kind of the big decision. You're going through it in step by step. And then lastly, don't decide and forget. Because that's no way to run anything. If it's important, you got to follow up and you want to check in. I don't mean you got to check in about every decision that's ever been made, because there's not enough time in the day to do that. But if it's important, if there's a lot of money on the table, if there are people that are really important in that decision that you're developing or creating opportunities or what have you, you want to follow up. You need to find, and it might be just a quick check-in. It doesn't have to be kind of all-day meetings. It doesn't have to be that. Boards of directors need to do that. Team leaders need to do that. And by the way, all of us should do that. If we think about even in our personal lives that we've made a decision or we're going in a particular direction, do we take a little bit of time to reflect, not forget, but reflect, to think about it and think about, do we need to pivot? So you see a lot of these ideas, they're interconnected, but they are the building blocks, the core elements that I think will help all of us make much better decisions. I think this last video and this one together, along with some of the practice exercises, really helps us kind of connect the dots in ways that I think will put us all in good shape for making better decisions and being more successful.